Peace, how you doing? This is Dr. Samori Swygert signing in again. And today we're going to be discussing what I'm titling Racism, the Ghost in the Machine. Now today I'm going to be discussing one of my favorite topics. I love staying in the vein of the innovations of science and technology because it's an ever-evolving field. It's always on the horizon, it's always on the cutting edge, but somehow it always has a way to impact our lives. And so I feel that it's my job to stimulate thought, to get people thinking, and not just passively accept changes in our society without questioning. I believe in 3D. And when I say 3D, that means I encourage 3D, and the 3Ds are dialogue, discourse, and discussion. Dialogue, discourse, and discussion. So I want to get into this. Racism, the ghost in the machine. Now, we're in this era of increase, what we say, a cyber society. We're in this technology-oriented society. We're in this digital metropolis. Every day you turn around, there's some new app, there's some new computer program, there's some new device, some new digital robotic contraption that is going to change the world or somehow provide you with some new convenience or something of that nature. So we're always evolving technologically, digitally, things of that nature, right? And people always ask, Samori, where do you get a lot of your ideas from? You seem like you like to think a lot. I do a lot of reading. I read a lot. I read a lot of journals. But aside from reading them, I sit down and I think, what does this article mean to me? And what are the implications of this article right now? What about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What about how it's going to affect the children? And a lot of things. I do a lot of extrapolation from what I read and interpret and things of that nature. And I'm thinking about, there's a gentleman by the name of Ray Kurzweil. He's an MIT professor, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's received several laureates. He owns a lot of patents. And he is a pioneer, one of many pioneers in the field of science and technology. And one thing that he discusses a lot is this concept called singularity. Singularity, I'll say it one more time. Singularity for those that are unfamiliar with it. But singularity, what does it mean? It's basically when it's the point in time that many of these pioneers and scientists and researchers believe that computers and machines and robots will become autonomous, and what do I mean by autonomous? Meaning these robots, these computers, these machines, they will then be able to teach themselves. They will be able to learn. They have their own cognition. Okay? They will be able to learn and understand these algorithms, these protocols. They can sequence codes. They can synthesize conclusions from a lot of complex data that they're presented with or that's inputted, and arrive at their own endpoints and outcomes and conclusions. So that's the singularity. When computers and robots, they no longer need us. They will think for themselves, but that's based on how they're coded. Understand? So it's theorized, it's believed, it's hypothesized that, computers, robots, they'll develop that capacity, the capability to think for themselves and make independent decisions. That is the singularity. But like I said, the name of this is called Racism, the Ghost in the Machine. So you're like, Samori, how you throw racism on the table when we're talking about technology, cyber sophistication, all this digital good stuff. Well, I look at it like this. When we talk about technology and computers and software, all we're doing is we're talking about inanimate objects that man has found a way to manipulate the matter to behave in a way that he wants it to behave. So, we take precious metals and minerals, we understand the properties of these things, and we found a way to manipulate them to provide us with the convenience and the activities and the actions that we wish for it to do. You can walk up, you go into the grocery store, you walk up to a certain proximity of the sensor on the door automatically opens. It doesn't necessarily mean that the door is alive. It's not a living, breathing organism, but we found a way to manipulate matter so that it can sense and respond and react to the presence of you being in front of that sensor, right? And that's pretty simple. We've been doing that since the 80s, though. Now, we're in the new millennium, so expect things to be exponentially different, exponentially more complex, exponentially more sophisticated. Now, I'll say this. If we're not included, if we are excluded, if we do not participate in this dawning, this new dawn, the ever-evolving dawn of robotics and digitization and software engineering and computer engineering and coding, research and development, okay? When we're talking about the building of computers and drones and robots, and you think about a lot of the movies that you see, if you just look at the movies in the future, they call them dystopian films where the future doesn't seem like a utopia, meaning a pure, true, and blissful vision. It's more of a dystopia, meaning an unpleasant, maybe a fearful and unwanted and uncomfortable view of the future. Yeah, that's what you see. So you think about like The Matrix, you think of iRobot, you think of Minority Report. These are some classic examples of movies where technology has turned into the oppressor of man. But then you have to ask yourself, well, what role is man, how is man intimately integrated into the development of his own oppressor, which would be the machines and the robots and everything like that. And I say it's kind of like the same way that we think of when we train a dog or a pet. It's all by conditioning, the Pavlov experiment. And all it is it's a very simple concept, and that concept is association between two things. It could be whatever the two is, sound and behavior. So when I say sit to a dog, that's just a sound. Sit, that's a sound. When the letters S, I, and T are put together, it means nothing to the dog yet. But as I impart my behavior on that dog, force it down. Every time I say sit, I keep pushing its tail down to the floor and rewarding it when it responds to me pushing it down to do that. And I keep doing that routinely. I have conditioned that dog to the sound of sit, which is just the conglomeration of three letters S, I, and T. Eventually, the dog will do that automatically without me having to put my hand on it. It'll sit and in expectation of a reward, right? And that's just temporary conditioning. That's just trained association. But then we think of computers, right? That's association too. That is a permanent programmed association though. So when we start talking about coding, when we start putting certain codes together, these robots, these machines, the software, it will act a certain way. The same way, like I said, when you walk up to your Kroger's grocery store, Wegmans grocery store, Shoppers grocery store, Piggly Wiggly, Food Line, wherever you shop. When you walk up to the door, the automatic sensors open, you're able to get into the store. So we know that we're able to get complex machinery to perform the way we want it to perform. But the racism now, where does that come into play? What about the coder itself, the person, the software engineer, the computer technologist? If the person has a racist agenda, how can we guarantee the purity of the code? Right? Like, for instance, if they start determining codes where we start showing pictures and we start uploading JPEG images, right, of white people. We keep saying these shades of a person, these shades in the shape of a person in this JPEG is white. And I put a code for white. That'd be like 00011. Then I start uploading pictures of black people, brown people. And we say that's black, that's brown. That is code 0111101, right? Now I want you to match a certain behavior to those codes. All right? I have now interjected and installed a racism code in some of these things. So then when you think about the robots that are coming out, when you think about the drones that are coming out, you think about the computers. And then we talk about the singularity where robots can start acting independently. It brings into question, how do we examine the integrity of the coders of this stuff? And so it gets even more complex because we may be like, okay, well, you know what? That would be too easy to try and, get somebody. We may be able to figure out and crack the code, figure out who put a code for black, a code for white, X, Y, and Z, a code for Latino, Jew, Muslim, whatever the case may be. But then they can be like, okay, well, you know what? Let's do it like this. I don't have to code for color per se. I will code using another variable that represents the color. Meaning, let's code for GPS. Map out the United States of America and where the demographic is highly populated, densely packed with black and brown people. We're going to code these robots to be these robocops, the drones, to be more aggressive, to use an alternative lethal force on that population in that specific GPS locale, because we're going to code what the latitude and longitudinal degrees are at that point. And whenever you're in that code, whenever you're in that district, whenever you're in that zip code, that GPS location, you can use X, Y, and Z lethal force, more brutality, more aggressive behavior. Don't say that it doesn't happen, because I can break it down to a more humanistic level where we're not talking about technology. Let's talk about stop and frisk, because we see that happening every day. When you look at what happens in Harlem and Brooklyn and how police will harass, they are way more aggressive. They the level of engagement is way more intense when they're in Harlem and Brooklyn, highly populated areas where there's a high proportion of black and brown people. But yet, if you would go out to the Hamptons and Long Island, a lot of other ritzy, posh, shishi, foo-foo, or what other type of terminologies you want to use, more upscale, much luxurious, classy, lavish neighborhoods, you're not going to see that type of oppressive, aggressive, and assertive behavior with the cops when they're doing stop and frisk. It's not going to happen. They already have published numerous reports about that. So what makes you think that can't happen on a digital level if you do not know the integrity of character of the person that is coding? That's the question I'm talking about. It's the difference between when you're in Atlanta and you're in Bankhead and Buckhead. Or if you're in Florida and you're in Liberty City versus Palm Beach, Harlem and the Hamptons, Georgetown, D.C. and Southeast D.C. It's a difference. There's a dichotomy there. So this is what I mean, the ghost in the machine, racism. So what it is, the takeaway message is, now that this is something that I'm thinking about, and if I've thought about it, I don't consider myself to be any genius. I'm just somebody that likes to think. If I can think about it, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of people in America, you already know this is already being thought about. So it's imperative that we have our children to really take up a lot of study, to really pursue excellence in the technological fields. They should be the watchdogs. They should be there intimately integrated in the development, the research and development, the application, the development of policies when it comes to this era of technology, to prevent this type of stuff from becoming pervasive and happening, because I see it over the horizon, and I think that's what it is. So anyway, I'm out of here. Didn't mean to be long-winded, but I just wanted to share my thoughts with you. You can hit me on Twitter at DocSwag06, DOCSWAGG06. You can hit my man Vigilante that rocks with me. That is at VIGALANTEE on Twitter. You can find my album, Porn, that stands for Poetry, Oration, Rhythm, and Narrative. That is on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, and CD Baby. That is probably the best jazz and poetry. I'm telling you, they've said that it's, what can I say? It's the new age version, the new millennium version of the Love Jones soundtrack, and done by all HBCU band, lyrics written by me, live, in-studio horn, saxophone, piano, keyboard, all of that. So anyway, I'm going. Over and out. Be blessed. Peace.